Hey there, and welcome! Today, we're stepping into the shoes of linguistic detectives. In this explainer, we are going to learn how to decode the hidden mechanics of human communication. I am absolutely thrilled to be your guide as we uncover the invisible forces that shape literally everything we say, read, and hear.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our agenda. First up, more than just words, then the three pillars of context, followed by situational meaning shifts, cultural norms and cues, decoding ambiguity, and finally, some interactive practice. We've got a lot of fascinating ground to cover, so let's just jump right in.
Section 1. More than just words. Language in a vacuum.
So we're going to start with this illusion of decontextualized language. Basically, it's the idea that words can just exist in a vacuum. Take the phrase, I saw a tree, right? If a student says this to you, you understand the words perfectly without needing a drawing or a photograph. But do you actually know why they're telling you this without the surrounding context? Like, are they excited? Did a tree just fall down on their way to school? The words alone simply don't give us the full picture.
And you know, this brilliantly illustrates our core problem. We can have the exact same words, but completely different meanings based entirely on the setting. So on the left, saying it's very hot here to a friend while you're standing outside, you're just complaining about the weather. But on the right, saying that exact same phrase to an installer in a closed office, that functions as a direct request to install an air conditioner. It's crazy, but the physical setting actually creates the meaning.
Moving on to Section 2. Three pillars of context, specifically looking at Yang and Hu's framework.
To solve these communicative mysteries, we really need the right analytical tools. Experts Yang and Hu remind us that communication never happens in a vacuum. So let's break down the three distinct lenses of context that they identify. You can think of these as the three pillars that literally hold up our understanding of language. All right, here is your very first tool, linguistic context. A lot of folks also call this cotext. This involves looking at the surrounding words to predict the ensuing content, or maybe guess a missing word's meaning. It's the literal text that comes right before and right after a phrase that helps us eliminate ambiguity. It's kind of like using the puzzle pieces you already have to figure out the one that's missing. Tool number 2 is situational context. This evaluates the immediate physical setting and the current interactions of the people talking. It looks at the time, the place, and the physical mode of conversation. This is exactly what helps us figure out if the sudden phrase is a joke, a command, or just a random observation based on, where we happen to be standing at the time. And the third tool looks at the macro level, cultural context. This examines the cultural roots that explain connotations and fill in broader semantic blanks. We're talking about the history, customs, and value standards of the speakers. It's essentially this invisible backpack of norms that we bring into every single conversation we have. Which brings us to Section 3. Situational meaning shifts. Let's see how this creates real-world situational shifts and really test those detective skills of yours. Look at the phrase, how are you? If a teacher says it in a busy hallway, it's just functioning as a simple passing greeting. But if a counselor sits down in their quiet office and says, how are you? Notice my voice shift there? The form of the words is exactly the same, but that social setting alters the function completely. Suddenly, it becomes a genuine inquiry, requiring a real, honest answer. Okay, let's put this into practice. Pause this explainer for a second and really test yourself. How could situational context decode this complete grammatical mess? Golf plays John. That sounds totally illogical, right? Well, let's look at the answer. Imagine John's technique is absolutely terrible. He's out there swinging and missing, losing every single ball. In that specific setting, the sentence is actually an intentional taunt. So the crucial takeaway here is that the situation, meaning John failing miserably on the green, takes a totally illogical phrase and turns it into a cutting, clever joke.
Next up, Section 4. Cultural norms and cues, and those unspoken signals.
So now we really have to examine how our backgrounds and unspoken signals drastically shift our communication goals. Here is a super handy, brief checklist to evaluate cultural factors in literally any spoken dialogue, and this is based on linguist Delheim's framework. Whenever you are analyzing a conversation, you should deliberately ask yourself about the setting, the participants involved, the channel of communication, the message form, and the topic. Now, notice how cultural cues can be drastically misinterpreted across different groups. Take the discourse feature of signifying found in African American English, which involves a very specific kind of verbal artistry and play. As our source material points out, students might view this as a playful norm, while some teachers might mistakenly interpret it as a disrespectful register. Similarly, in some cultures, a downward glance means respect, but to an outsider, it might just look like defiance. These different cultural lenses can easily lead to a vicious cycle of misunderstanding.
All right, Section 5, Decoding Ambiguity. Let's look at a step-by-step guide.
Let's systematize our approach with a formal step-by-step guide for your own analysis. When transcribing and analyzing dialogue, you want to ask yourself these 3 critical questions to peel back the layers of meaning. First, what words or grammatical forms stand out? Second, how are they functioning right now in this specific moment? And third, is outside context informing this interaction?
So, if we apply that first step to the sentence here about Victor and Jane, we see that pronouns like he and she rely entirely on the linguistic context, remember the cotext, to tell us exactly who is who. If we didn't have that first sentence introducing Victor and Jane, the pronouns he and she would literally be completely meaningless to us.
And finally, Section 6, Interactive Practice. Time to test your skills.
You have the tools, you have the checklist. Now welcome to the Interactive Practice Bootcamp. Look closely at this conversational transcript between a counselor and a student named Jack. The counselor asks a very simple question, and Jack immediately bursts into tears. Now, why the sudden, intense reaction? Well, the text alone doesn't explain the tears at all. It's the invisible, situational, and social context bleeding into the interaction that fills the semantic vacancy. The missing background info here is that Jack had a miserable day outside the classroom. What happens outside the room directly dictates the emotional weight of the words spoken inside the room. It's a perfect example of language in use affecting social context.
Let's do one more of these. Pause the explainer again. A husband calls out, "That's the phone." His wife replies from down the hall, "I'm in the bathroom." Now, how do they understand each other? On paper, these 2 sentences seem totally unrelated. So what context type bridges this communication gap? It's the situational context. It connects them completely. He is implying she should answer the phone, and she is implying she physically can't. For your classroom mission, your assignment is to role play and act out this phone and bathroom dialogue using those situational cues. Then, try rewriting out-of-context sentences to make them clear. For instance, try taking informal peer language like a student saying train dudes and rewriting it to train people to fit a formal context. And I'm going to leave you with this final thought. If society, physical setting, and cultural context dictate so much of our meaning, how much agency do we truly have when we speak? Think about that next time you open your mouth. Thanks for joining me on this Explainer, detectives. Keep decoding